The laughter hit harder than the wine. A crimson arc cut through the ballroom's golden light and landed across Sariah Voss's shoulder like a deliberate punctuation. Crystal chandeliers trembled with the sound of flashbulbs. Champagne stopped in mid-air. For a suspended heartbeat, the whole room became aware only of that red stain creeping across silk and the face it decorated, Sariah's, calm as marble. She had spent the last 6 months negotiating a partnership everyone here had called inevitable. Media walls displayed press clips of her speeches. Investors whooped at her table like admirers at a show. Tonight was a celebration. Handshakes, an oversized check on display. The Sterling family seated close enough to touch the ceremony's seam. In that curated ecosystem of status and lenses, reputation was currency, and spectacle served as its engine. Isabella Sterling approached as if she owned the room. Her smile was engineered for magazine covers, wide, bright, rehearsed, but it never reached her eyes. She stopped a half-step too close, offered a too familiar syrupy comment about expectations and the kind of leadership we prefer, and then, without warning, let the wine spill. A deliberate flood, arcing like judgment. The room reacted in a dozen fractured ways, a sharp intake of breath, muffled laughter from the back, the metallic click of a photographer's shutter. Some guests leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Isabella's lips curled as if the moment were a private triumph and the rest of the room her audience. Sariah did what few expected. She did not yell. She did not flinch into melodrama. Her expression held the quiet of someone who had rehearsed this kind of pressure and refused to grant it power over her. Her hand slipped into her clutch, fingers finding her phone. She did not speak to Isabella. She did not storm the stage. Instead, with the same economy of motion she used to close deals, she tapped a single command into the screen. Seconds later, just as the title of this night would come to be whispered across social feeds, the patriarch walked in. He did not arrive with the bumptious force of an ally. He entered with the gravity of someone whose presence folded attention toward him like a magnet. Cameras pivoted. A hush fell that had nothing to do with the spilled wine and everything to do with who now stood in the frame. Mr. Sterling, the family's patriarch, the man whose name opened doors that most people never approached. For a moment he was expected to be a shield for Isabella, a public stage on which the family's narrative could be restored with a perfunctory gesture. Instead, his arrival became a catalytic pivot. He paused, took in the scene, and, visible to everyone, checked his phone. In those seconds, the room's choreography changed. Assistants fumbled for statements. Someone whispered into an earpiece. The cameras, which had been hunting scandal, now trained themselves on the family's reaction. That outward show was the hinge the rest of the world needed. If the family's elder showed anything less than defiance, speculation would bloom. Sariah's single word, quiet, measured, nearly inaudible to those not within arm's reach, carried like a drop of cold water. "Proceed," she said into her device, and into motion came a small army of strategy. A verified company statement was drafted. Legal counsel prepared to invoke the integrity clause built into partnership agreements, a press release queued on secure channels. The mechanics were invisible to the crowd, but their effect would not be. The room held its breath while the digital world began to stir. Within moments, phones lit. Someone in the corner replayed the moment on a tiny screen and hit send. A clip began to circulate. The verified statement, short, formal, and unambiguous, appeared in the company's name. "Due to conduct inconsistent with our integrity standards, the partnership has been terminated, effective immediately." It did not call names. It did not point fingers. It did what such statements always do best. It reframed the narrative from a private humiliation to a public accountability. The reaction was instantaneous and merciless in its speed. Feed counters climbed. Notifications multiplied into a chorus. Investors at the event checked tablet screens, brows knitting. The ballroom that had minutes before been puffed with self-congratulation now felt exposed, as if the chandeliers revealed rather than hid. Isabella's smile, so practiced, faltered under the sudden cold scrutiny. Sariah stepped toward the microphone that had been left on the podium for ceremonial remarks. Her voice, when it came, was soft, direct, the sort of diction that carries authority because it refuses to shout. "This room taught me how to close a deal," she said. "Tonight it taught me what some people still think courtesy of their money, that humiliation is entertainment. We do not work in a vacuum. We are accountable to the trust of our partners, our employees, and the public. Respect is not a favor to be bestowed. It is a standard." Her gaze did not aim to punish Isabella. It aimed to place the event in a larger frame. Class and decency, not theatrics, determine real leadership. There was no gloating in her tone. There was no triumphant strut. Only the disciplined calm of someone shifting the moral center of a room with facts and restraint rather than spectacle. Cameras recorded everything. Desk editors wrote quick headlines capturing the arc. Public humiliation at gala, partnership terminated. Social media churned with clips and commentary. The narrative, once set, moved through the public like a current that prevents anyone nearby from denying its force. Isabella's entitlement, once amplified by a chorus of onlookers, shrank. Her laughter died into a patter of excuses none believed. Guests who had been eager to be close now made polite but distinct room for distance. The patriarch watched, impassive at first, then notably composed, giving nothing to the cameras except a measured exit. For a family accustomed to controlling the story, the sudden need to control damage was a bitter reversal. By dawn, the consequences had clarity. The partnership was no longer just a line in the evening program. It was a now public, terminated agreement with a simple explanation. Integrity clause enforced. Market chatter noted reputational risk. Commentators debated entitlement and consequence. Isabella's social calendar, for the first time in years, read as a list of late cancellations. The viral clip was shared across platforms, not in celebration of humiliation, but as a lesson in the limits of privilege. And yet the point of the night was not Sariah's vindication. It was a demonstration of a different kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to roar. In a culture quick to reward spectacle and ready to side with the loudest interrupter, Sariah's playbook was almost quaint. Preserve dignity, let procedure do the heavy lifting, and narrate the event with a steady voice so headlines reflect principle rather than passion. She allowed the world to see the consequences of arrogance without stooping to replicate it. There were, of course, those who criticized the public fallout as performative. There were op-eds speculating about reputations and market responses. But the arc the world followed was clear enough. A public act of humiliation met a measured institutional answer, and that answer was broadcast for all to weigh. In the aftermath, people began to test what dignity looked like in public life. Corporate boards revisited language in their agreements. PR teams rehearsed responses that did not sound like cover-ups. For many observers, the lesson was immediate and simple. How you carry yourself when insulted reveals more about your power than the insult ever could. Sariah walked out of the ballroom later that night with her jacket over one shoulder, the wine now a fading memory, and a cautionary stain on the evening's page. Reporters asked questions. She answered a few with the same precision she used with partners. Isabella left through a side door whose handle now felt less polished under the light of scrutiny. By the time morning's headlines settled into the news cycle, the incident had a life beyond the ballroom. A clip, a statement, a market response described in broad strokes, and a conversation about dignity that would linger longer than any scandal-hungry whisper. The patriarch's entrance, the very moment the title marks as decisive, was replayed and analyzed. Not because he had saved anyone, but because his arrival crystallized the moment the public began to hold privilege to account. Power, the story suggested, is not always loud. Sometimes it is composed, strategic, and procedural. Sometimes it is the quiet insistence that the rules meant to apply to everyone actually do apply to everyone, even those who believe their money buys exception. If you respect quiet power, subscribe for more stories like this.